We'll give it another minute or two. It's just about 12:59.
Okay. Cindy, I meant to ask you, who is the audience for today?
The audience for today is our students, some of our staff and faculty, in addition to FDA staff.
Okay.
So it's a little mixture.
So from the student standpoint, their area of study is in the food space?
Well, we have different, I'm going to let Todd answer that one because he knows better than me.
Hi, Eric. We have people from food safety and technology. We have some food process engineers attending today. We have some who are undergraduates in our food science and nutrition program.
Okay.
So we have a little bit of a spread, but everyone has some focus on food.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
We may also have some students from chemistry and biology as well, too, because we've been talking with them across campus, and I did extend the invitation to those students as well.
Okay, great.
I think we give it one more minute. I just sent out a bunch of reminders to everybody, and then we'll let you get started.
All right, sounds good.
All right, Eric, I would say go ahead and start. Thank you so much for agreeing to give our seminar on sugar reduction. Eric is from Ingredion, and I'm going to let you take it from there.
Okay, thank you, Cindy. Again, appreciate the offer that you extended to be able to present to the folks there at IIT across those multiple disciplines that you mentioned. So hopefully there's a little bit here for everybody. Probably the most interest is going to be in for the food science majors, because that's primarily where a lot of this information is kind of directed to, that type of field of study. But again, hopefully there'll be a little bit here for everybody that will be of interest. Again, my name is Eric Shinsato. I'm with Ingredion in Sweetener Technical Support or Technical Service Group. So I support our sweeteners business, which is pretty much everything that comes out of the Argo plant. For those of you who are on the IIT campus here in Bedford Park, it's that nice, wonderful plant that sits across the railroad tracks. That is the largest plant within the Ingredion network and probably one of the oldest ones as well. So again, I've been based here for my whole career with Ingredion. And we're in that little building that sits between your campus and the plant. So that's where I sit on a regular basis. And what I'd like to talk to you today about is one of the areas that our company has spent a great deal of time on, and is focusing based on what we hear in the marketplace, both from our customers as well as consumers, and that's in the area of sugar reduction. So with that, what I'm going to give you today is a rather high-level overview of what we consider ingredients, for sugar reduction, and what are the drivers for using these ingredients as they relate to not only consumers, but to our customers or the manufacturers who would use these ingredients to make their finished food products. So we always like to start to kind of lay the grounds for the presentation with what's going on in the market. So what's out there, what are consumers looking for, and how we can respond to those particular needs. Then we'll dive a little bit deeper into what we call sugar reduction, and a term that we've kind of coined called functional build back. And I'll explain, the ins and outs of both of those in a minute. Then we'll go through a quick review of our portfolio and how all of these ingredients can play in the role for sugar reduction and functional build back. And I'd like to conclude with sort of a case study or an example of how we've used these ingredients in order to create a prototype of sorts that we have developed, that we actually presented to a customer who was looking for specific requirements in the area of sugar reduction for one of their particular product lines. And then at the end, we'll have some time for Q&A. But if you have questions during the presentation, please feel free to jump in or write something down in the chat. I think Cindy will be watching that, and we can address those as we go along as well. But again, very informal. Feel free to jump in if you have a question. So with that, again, the question is, so what is this all about when we're talking about sugar reduction? So we go to marketing as well as consumer related work in order to figure out what's happening in the world today. So we look at it not only from a North America or US, Canada perspective, but we also look at it from a global standpoint as well, because Ingredion is a global company. So we serve markets around the world, and sugar reduction means different things to different countries. And depending on what's going on in those particular regions, sugar reduction can have more impact than other areas of focus. But again, we like to look at it kind of a holistic way to provide sugar reduction that can be used across the globe. So when we talk about consumers, we do a lot of consumer study work, and we actually use some of our own resources to develop particular consumer insights. And some of the information that we get out of that helps drive where we're going in terms of sugar reduction. So some of the general things that we've discovered is that a majority of consumers are looking at sugar in their diet. And a lot of the consumers, and almost half of them, want to reduce the amount of sugar that they're consuming. And this has shown a significant uptick since we last looked at this in like 2009, for example. And then again, almost half of the population is looking at the package. In other words, they're reading the package, reading the ingredient declaration, nutrition facts panel, looking for sugar. And we've seen that, again, people actually reading labels has gone up significantly since 2009 as well. Some of the things that are driving sugar reduction and the awareness of sugar consumption across the globe can be seen in the World Health Organization. What they have noticed that a lot of countries are adding taxes on different types of food products. This has been happening over the past several years in order to kind of drive down the consumption of products that contain high amounts of sugar. So this is going, or has been growing in a number of countries, including the US. Labeling is another thing that's been driving the whole focus on sugar reduction as well. So a good example is what's going on in Mexico. What we've seen there is a focus on front of pack labeling. So one of the new things that the Mexican government has instituted is that any food product that has high levels of sugar or fat or other ingredients they feel are not healthy, you see what's called a black octagon. So it's like basically a black stop sign. And the more you see of those on the front of pack, that's an indication that there are ingredients in there that they consider not particularly healthy. So Canada has done a lot. Health Canada is also looking at changing labeling requirements, and the US has done that as well, in the form of FDA looking at labeling in terms of added sugars. So that's one of the areas that we focused on as well from an ingredient standpoint, is how can we reduce the amount of added sugar, since that's now part of the nutrition facts panel. So if you look at the number of new product launches that have come out recently, you'll see a wide variety of different types of products across different categories, anywhere from beverage to confectionery to snacks to other types of beverages and other types of condiments that have come across with either no sugar added or low in sugar or sugar-free as being some of the claims that are being made. So some of the things that we've seen tremendous growth in is the area of hard seltzers. We've worked quite significantly in this particular space with our stevia products, because they're looking at reducing the amount of sugar or taking out the sugar altogether in these types of products, but still maintaining a good taste And sweetness is a key part of that to make sure that these products are still appealing to the consumer, even though they've basically taken out the sugars and calories as well. Keto has been another area that our consumer research has kind of come back showing areas of significant growth. So the keto diet is probably one of the more popular ones that are currently going on that consumers are aware of, and some of them are following. So again, keto is looking at carbohydrates, and part of carbohydrates includes sugars. So anything that can reduce the amount of sugars will help in that particular type of product to help people who are looking to follow that type of diet. And then just in general, things like no sugar added, so products that are considered or typically considered high in sugar, things like barbecue sauce. A lot of the more popular brands have come out with either low sugar or even no sugar added variations of those particular products. So we see these again in a lot of different spaces across different segments. And the growth, as you can see, has jumped quite a bit in terms of new product launches. So given that this is a popular space to play in, it's a focus from consumers, there's a lot of space to grow in the market itself. So if you're looking at it from a product developer standpoint, how do you tackle something like this? How do you reduce sugar but still maintain the same eating quality that you would find in the full sugar product? So that's where Ingredion has taken this approach and looking at sugar reduction. So we talk about two phases or two prongs to this approach. The first one is sweetness replacement. So that's the relatively easy challenge to overcome. Sweetness can be replaced by any number of ingredients. And within our toolbox, we rely heavily on our stevia portfolio. Again, these are what are considered plant-based, natural type of high potency sweetener. So this would be the alternative to the artificials like sucralose and aspartame. So again, plant-based, anything that's non-artificial is highly recognized among consumers and are preferred over the artificials as well. So that's one of the main drivers in the sweetness replacement space. Along with that, we have other ingredients that also provide sweetness, usually at a lower level, but again, still provide sweetness. The big challenge, though, in reducing sugar is replacing the bulk that sugar provides and that is lost when you take it out or reduce it significantly. So this is the area that we call functional build back. So what we're trying to do is replace the functional properties that sucrose provides in terms of bulking, browning, moisture retention, other functional aspects that sugar provides that are significantly reduced or lost altogether when you take sugar out of a particular product. So in order to replace that, we look into our toolbox from a multiple ingredient standpoint. There are many options that can be used to replace sugar and provide that functionality that sugar provides. So typically sugar alcohols or polyols are the go-to. These have been used for many, many years. They work very well. They function at a similar level, and they are relatively cost effective within this type of application. However, a lot of the new products that are developed are shying away from sugar alcohols or polyols, primarily for labeling as well as digestive tolerance issues, which we'll talk about when we go into the polyols. So we have to come up with an alternative to that. So what else do we have to offer from our toolbox? So we look at our different types of sweeteners. So Ingredion is big in glucose-based sweeteners. So that includes dextrose and corn syrup, maltodextrin, and those types of ingredients that can provide the bulk, but are not necessarily low in sugar. So we have to look at it from a different angle. How can we use our technology to help drive down sugar while still using the functional properties of these ingredients? Other areas to look at are kind of the more novel ingredients or the more newly released ingredients. One of those being in the rare sugar space called allulose. Not sure how many of you have heard of it, but it is growing in popularity as a bulk sugar replacer. And we'll talk about those in detail in a minute. And then lastly, there are some other supplemental ingredients that help with the functional build back properties. So Those include fibers, starches, and hydrocolloids. So a lot of times texture is lost when sugar is reduced or removed completely. So you have to build that back as well. So within our portfolio of what we look at from a sugar reduction standpoint, if we break it out into the two halves, the stevia products are on the left. So my colleague Fernando is going to give a presentation on stevia in 2 weeks. So hopefully you'll be able to tune in and listen to his presentation, because I only touched briefly on stevia, knowing that he's going to go into that in a lot more detail in the next week or the next couple of weeks. The areas that I'm going to focus on and the products that I'm going to talk about more are on the right half of this chart. So that's our polyols, our rare sugar allulose, our low sugar syrups, our soluble fibers, and some of the more unique ingredients that are in our portfolio as well, including fruit and vegetable-based products. So these are being used more and more in the sugar reduction space. So traditionally not the area that these products perform or play in, but from a sugar reduction standpoint, they do offer some novel solutions. And then there's what we call systems capabilities. So this is where we look at specialty blends. So these could be based on hydrocolloids. They could be combined with other starches or sweeteners in order to kind of tailor make a solution for particular applications. So one of the areas that we play in this space is in dairy. So things for ice cream and yogurt. We have specific solutions to help with sugar reduction in the form of these specialty blends. So when we talk about functional build back, it's something that we've kind of coined as a term, but as a concept as well. So what does that mean when we talk about functional build back? So in our world, what we did was we looked at individual ingredients across different applications to see how these ingredients performed in the area of sugar reduction or sugar replacement. So you can see we looked at the rare sugars, polyols, different types of traditional syrups, as well as fibers. So we screen those ingredients, determine what are the best qualities, what are their shortcomings, what did they work best in terms of an application, et cetera. Then from there, we looked at how do we combine the learnings from the single ingredients and use them in combinations of one or two or more, I should say, of these particular ingredients where we capitalize on their benefits or their key points and kind of downplay any of their shortcomings in order to optimize sugar reduction, as well as provide that functional build back that you need when you take sugar out. So from a formulation standpoint, after taking into consideration all the data that we gathered from these ingredients across these different applications, we looked at how do they function, what do they provide, do they perform as well as sugar, or do they bring something else to the table that can be a benefit as well. The other things that we looked at, some of these ingredients have GRAS limits in terms of usage levels in different applications. So we had to make sure that we did not exceed these when we're looking at usage levels for these particular ingredients. The other thing that we looked at as well is what we did not want to stack these ingredients on top of each other. So in most cases, these ingredients are not fully digested. So either they're fibers or they're sugar alcohols or slowly digestible carbohydrates. So they basically act as fibers, or they are fibers, and they can cause digestive tolerance issues. So we wanted to make sure that we didn't exceed limits by combining these together. So in other words, we didn't use the maximum usage level for a fiber in combination with the max level of a polyol, which would probably exceed, a typical limit, and that would definitely cause some digestive intolerance. So any questions up to this point? I can't see the chat, Cindy, so I'm not sure if anything's come across.
Nothing in the chat yet.
Okay, all right then. Again, feel free to jump in if you do have a question. So from an ingredient standpoint, we purchased or we have a significant interest in the company called Pure Circle. They're considered the leaders in the stevia space in terms of technology, research, and ingredient development. So we were able to expand our existing stevia portfolio through the acquisition of Pure Circle. And this is the space that my colleague Fernando will address in more detail. But just to give you a little bit of a teaser, if you're not familiar with stevia, stevia is from a plant. It's indigenous to South America. However, it is grown in other parts of the world. A lot of stevia currently is grown in China and again through South America as well. The different varieties exist and they all have their own different characteristics. But the thing that we're looking to get out of the stevia plant, and it actually comes from the leaf of the plant, are what are called stevioglycosides. And those are the sweet tasting components that are found in the stevia leaf. So if you look at this little diagram, you'll see that stevioglycosides do comprise a good bit of the leaf itself. And within that portion, there are multiple types of stevioglycosides. So that if you've heard of Reb A, that was the first stevia that was commercialized as a natural high potency sweetener. Since then, the newer products that have come to the market are Reb M and Reb D, as well as combinations of those stevioglycosides plus a whole host of others that are found in the leaf. And you'll see that on the table to the far right, the different Reb products. So those are the levels that they appear in the leaf. Some of them are there at higher levels than others, which makes them either more attractive from a commercialization standpoint, as well as an economic standpoint. They all have different tastes, different flavors, different levels of sweetness, and they all can be used to provide sweetness. So depending on how much sugar you're looking to replace or the level of sweetness that you want in a product, you have many things to choose from. But from the middle part of this graph where it talks about scale, those are the ones that are the most commonly commercialized to this point. And that's what you're going to find the most of when you're formulating. So within the Pure Circle portfolio, it's basically broken out into 5 areas. Just going to touch on these real quickly. There are what we call flavors. So these are stevia products that can be used as natural flavors. They're not used to provide sweetness, but they're primarily used to enhance the sweetness quality or to bring out other flavors or hide other flavors within a particular product. So again, these are products that we call have flavor modifying properties. So again, not used as sweeteners, but to help enhance sweetness and other flavors. Integrated solutions, these are more optimized types of products. They typically consist of blends that are tailored for a specific application, and they are designed to bring out the best sweetness for that particular application, as well as being cost effective at the same time. The middle part, foundation ingredients, these are your more traditional stevias, so products like Reb A and the lower Reb A type products are within this space. These are the most cost efficient ingredients. They do provide sweetness, but again, these were the initial products that were introduced. So Reb A in itself has certain limitations. So depending on the level of sweetness you're trying to achieve, Reb A can get you part of the way there in most cases. And if you don't need a lot of sweetness, Reb A probably will work fine for that application. Then there's what we call breakthrough ingredients. So these are the new products or the new ingredients that we're continuing to look at as we look at the different stevioglycosides that can be extracted from the leaf itself. So again, looking at these, how can we use these in combination with other ingredients, or what properties do they bring that are unique and that are different and perform above and beyond some of the foundation ingredients or the integrated solutions. So again, these are the ones that we're looking to grow the portfolio and to help solve even more complex problems when it comes to sweetness. Then there are what we call superfood extracts. So this is more longer term on the horizon. So there are other components of the stevia leaf besides the sweet components that can potentially be used for other applications. So CGA is an antioxidant that is found in the stevia leaf. So it's again a product that we're looking to commercialize, depending on how well we can extract it from the leaf itself and make it a viable ingredient. But again, just one of the areas beyond sweetness that you can get from stevia. All right, so the next ingredient we'll talk about is allulose, and allulose is a rare sugar. So What does that mean exactly? So rare sugars are ingredients that typically occur naturally in products that you find in nature. So figs, raisins, other types of products, allulose is there in very small amounts. So in order to make these commercially viable, we have to figure out a way to produce these products in order to bring that to scale and make it a viable ingredient instead of having to, extract the product from figs and raisins and other natural sources. From a breakthrough standpoint, in terms of allulose as a bulk sweetener, FDA changed the guidance back in 2019. So allulose is not counted as an added sugar or is it included in the total sugars on a nutrition facts panel. So this kind of was the game changer for this ingredient. So basically it's still a carbohydrate, but it doesn't count towards sugar. So that's where this ingredient came into play. That and the fact it can be used as a bulk sweetener. So it's great at replacing sugar. It is low calorie, only about 0.4 calories per gram. It is about 70% as sweet as sugar. So it does bring a lot of functional properties like the bulk. It does brown and it does have freeze point depression properties if you're looking at dairy products like ice cream. So again, usage levels will vary based on the application, and that's due to the GRAS limits that have been filed for using this type of ingredient or allulose in specific applications. And I think I've got a table that shows, the levels that are currently approved. Reason I've got this under here as well is that each manufacturer has basically filed their own GRAS status for their ingredients. So that's the particular number that Ingredion has. So we're under GRAS filing number 498. So if you see other numbers from other companies, that's because they filed separately. So this is the basic guideline that we use when we're formulating with allulose, and this is what we provide to our customers as well. We're looking at allulose for their different applications. So depending on the application, it could be as low as 2% in regular cereals or as high as 100% in sugar substitutes or tabletop type sweeteners, and anywhere in between. So a lot of these limits are being looked at. Some of them are on the low side, so they really don't provide a huge impact when it comes to sugar or calorie reduction. So, we're looking to get some of those raised so it becomes more of a viable ingredient that will provide an impact when it comes to sugar reduction as well as calorie reduction. The next ingredient are what we call low sugar syrups. So as I mentioned earlier, conventional corn syrups or glucose syrups are full calorie ingredients, and there are components of syrups that contribute to added sugars on a nutrition facts panel. So that's what we call the DP1 and DP2 component, or the dextrose and maltose portion of any type of glucose syrup. So again, all syrups have a certain percentage of these within them inherently, and they will contribute to the added sugars on a nutrition facts panel. So by working with our process, we can kind of manipulate those levels of DP1 and DP2 in order to drive that down to a relatively low level. So the actual overall contribution to added sugars by the glucose or corn syrup is brought down as well. So that shows up on the nutrition facts panel as added sugars. So our goal with this particular ingredient was to come up with an alternative to your standard glucose syrups. So 42DE is probably the most commonly used across most applications. It does bring a certain level of DP1 and DP2 or added sugars, so it's about 34%. If we can knock that down any significant amount, based on the typical level of corn syrup or glucose syrup used in a particular product, you can see a significant reduction in the added sugars. So we looked at basically our lower DE syrups. So that's like 28, 26, even as high as 36 to see how big of an impact that would have. So in most cases, these low DE syrups will reduce the added sugars by at least 50% when you're comparing it to the 42DE. One of the key things that, or key challenges that we had in developing this particular product was in glucose syrup or corn syrup chemistry, the lower the DE of the product, the higher the viscosity. So it kind of works against itself. So if we wanted to bring down the DP1, DP2, or lower the DE, we knew the viscosity was going to increase. And that did pose a problem with some of the early low sugar syrups that we tried to bring to market. So again, with 42DE as our target, with a specific viscosity number in mind, we wanted to work our process in order to lower that DP1, DP2 content, but also minimize the impact on the viscosity. So the end result was our product called VersaSweet 1721, which is essentially a 34DE syrup with half the DP1, DP2 contribution of your traditional 42DE, but maintains the same viscosity. So the reason that we did this is viscosity comes into play in processing. So a lot of the feedback we got from customers on our early low sugar syrups was the viscosity was too high for their process. They're used to working with a 42. The original products had significantly higher viscosity, and that basically played havoc with their process. So we knew we had to address that, and we feel that we succeeded by producing the 1721 product with a viscosity equal to the 42DE. So the next area is polyols or sugar alcohols. So again, as I mentioned earlier, these ingredients have been around for a long time. They are termed as sugar alcohols, and they show up on the nutrition facts panel as sugar alcohols. So basically they have partial or reduced calorie contribution, but they do not count as sugars. They do occur naturally in a lot of different products, fruits and vegetables, etc. But again, like allulose, they're in levels too low to try to extract from the fruits and vegetables themselves. So we've worked out different manufacturing process to create these polyols that are identical to what you would find in nature. So from a functional build-back standpoint, these are great bulking agents. They work very well when replacing sugar. They work very well in reduced sugar, no sugar added, and sugar-free type products. And they have been used like this for many, many years. There's a rather wide selection of polyols that can be used depending on the application. As I mentioned before, they are cost effective, again, because they've been produced for a long time, and the economies of scale are such that they can be used on a cost-effective basis. And also, as I mentioned before, not the most label-friendly in today's day and age where consumers are looking more closely at labels. So across the bottom, you'll see different types of applications. So again, great for sugar reduction, sugar replacement, and many applications. So from a portfolio standpoint, probably the go-to sugar alcohols or polyols that we use for sugar reduction and functional build-back are erythritol and maltitol. Maltitol is the one that can be basically a one-for-one replacement for sugar. It has very similar functional properties. It's about 90% as sweet as sugar when you're looking at the crystalline product. It handles very much like sugar, so it's an easy one-for-one replacement, and it's rather cost-effective as well. Maybe not so great on the labeling standpoint, so that's why the next go-to would be erythritol. Erythritol is different from all the other polyols from a manufacturing process, and that it's produced by fermentation. All the others are made by chemical reaction, so that's where those aren't so label friendly. But you'll see erythritol used in a wide variety of products in the more quote-unquote natural space, just because from a labeling standpoint, people recognize it as a little bit more label friendly when it comes to a sugar alcohol. It is 70% as sweet as sugar. It works very well in most applications. One of the things that you have to be on the watch out for when using erythritol is its low solubility. So that means it's going to want to crystallize if it's used at too high a level. So if you can keep it in solution and say a beverage, that's great. In other dry applications or non-beverage applications, you may have the tendency to have that crystallize out if you use it at too high a level. So this is just a handy dandy reference chart of all the sugar alcohols that are out there. Some of the things to keep in mind, relative sweetness, the different calorie levels, but the key thing when we're talking about digestive tolerance, there are thresholds for the different polyols in terms of how many grams you want to take in on any given day. So that's why we're cautious about not stacking these functional build-back ingredients on top of each other to the extent that we would cause, digestive tolerance issues, based on the typical limits for the ingredients on an individual basis. Just if you look at it real quick, erythritol from the sugar alcohol standpoint, it's probably the most highly tolerated. So again, another reason why that's one of the go-to functional build-back ingredients from the sugar alcohol portfolio. So the next area that we look at from a sugar reduction standpoint, and you may not think of it as a sugar reduction ingredient, but it's soluble fiber. So from a fiber standpoint, it's great. We all need more of that in our diet, but we've also learned that soluble fibers are great at replacing sugar up to certain levels. So within that space, we have a couple of different soluble fibers. One is more of a prebiotic, more of an ingredient that's designed for health claims. So around the Nutriflora soluble fiber with the prebiotic effects. Basis behind that is we did a lot of clinical studies with Nutriflora, and we have a lot of that information that documents its health benefits depending on the usage level as well as the application. It is slightly sweet, about 30% of Swedish sugar, so it does provide some sweetness. It does provide bulk. It does provide functionality in terms of humectancy, some browning properties. It's great at flavor modulation. We've seen it work in different applications where it can either work in conjunction with sugar alcohols like erythritol to help round out flavors, and also with ingredients like stevia, where it helps to kind of hide some of the bitterness or astringency or licorice notes that you would typically see with some of those stevia products. One of the limiting factors, though, with this type of product, its maximum usage level currently is 1 gram per 1 gram per serving. So usage level is relatively low, unfortunately. On the other hand, though, there are other soluble fibers that can be used at much higher levels, and one of them is what we call soluble corn fiber. So again, this is an ingredient that is also recognized as a dietary fiber. It is very low in calories. It is very process tolerant, and it can replace sugar up to certain levels in different types of applications. Fibers have the tendency to contribute viscosity to products. So from a soluble corn fiber standpoint, it's relatively low in viscosity, so it has a minimal impact on most processes. It does label as soluble corn fiber, so you do get that from a labeling standpoint, and it can contribute fiber to the overall nutrition of the particular product. So one of the other things that we need more of are fruits and vegetables. And this is where I mentioned earlier is that within the Ingredion network, we have a company called Kerr, which specializes in fruit and vegetable products. So not only do they do juices, concentrates, purees, and distillates, other things, they do whole fruits as well. They specialize in strawberries, and they're working on other new ideas and other concepts on how to use juices and juices not from concentrate in order to help reduce sugar in different applications. So as an example, different juice concentrates, purees, not from concentrate juices can be used for reducing sugar as well as making no added sugar claims. So this is the area where you have to be careful when you're looking at concentrates and not from concentrates, because you have to look at whether it's a single strength ingredient or not, and that will have the determining factor on whether it's an added sugar or not. So It will vary based on the product itself, so you kind of have to look at them on an individual basis when you're looking to formulate products to include these to help reduce sugar. One of the new things that they're working on at Kerr is from a processing standpoint, how do you reduce the sugar in different types of juices or different types of fruit-based juices from a process standpoint, where you take out a good bit of that sugar before you reach the final product, but also, not negatively impact any of the flavor or color or nutritional aspects of that product at the same time. So I wanted to give a couple examples that I thought were rather unique with the fruit and juice products in order to reduce sugar. So this was a gummy product that they developed using an orange carrot juice concentrate in order to not only give color as well as flavor, but to help reduce sugar. So in this case, it was also based on our allulose and one of our low sugar syrups as well. So very low sugar product, only 3 grams of sugar and added sugars per serving, which is relatively low for a gummy type application compared to full sugar. So in this case, 80% reduced sugar. And the other one that I thought was really neat, and this was a concept that we presented to a customer, was a no sugar added chocolate donut. And it also featured a red beet puree from Kerr to help reduce sugar as well as reduce some of the fat. So in making this product, it actually looks, tastes, and has the same eating qualities of a full sugar, full fat donut. I was really surprised at that, but with all the ingredients that we used from our functional Build-Back toolbox, you'll see the soluble fiber, erythritol, allulose, stevia products, as well as one of our starches to help with the texture of the donut itself. You'll see that all of these things used in combination can make a very nice no sugar added product, something that you wouldn't typically see in a donut, which is more of an indulgent product, but again, no sugar added, but still a very indulgent product as a prototype. So the last thing are hydrocolloids or gums. So not the kind you want to chew on, but they do bring texture to finished products. So Ingredion purchased TIC gums, which is probably one of the leading hydrocolloid manufacturers and developers within the industry. So long history with TIC gums. It was a family-owned company until we purchased them. But again, like some of our other partners like Pure Circle, they were focused on hydrocolloids. That was their business, that was their specialty. So they knew or they know all the ins and outs of hydrocolloid chemistry, and that helps them to develop new products as well as those food systems that we talked about earlier that are based on combinations of different gums and hydrocolloids to provide different functionalities and to enhance texture when you're looking at reduced sugar products. So within the space of hydrocolloids for sugar reduction, one of the areas that TIC has worked in is in the area of bars. So things like granola bars, nutrition bars, any bars that use or are made of particulate type products, whether it's crisps or oatmeal or nuts, things of that nature where you need something to help hold all those pieces together. Typically hydrocolloids are used as part of what's called a binder syrup. And within that binder syrup, it's typically a sweetener based type of system, whether it's corn syrup or high fructose corn syrup or sugar. Sweeteners are the primary ingredient in the binder syrup. It gives the stick that holds everything together. But also part of these binder syrups are hydrocolloids, and these are used to help control viscosity of that syrup itself. So it also helps give different binding characteristics as well as help with shelf life. So a lot of times with these types of bars, they tend to get hard over time. That's one of the things that you're kind of fighting against when you're looking at shelf life. So hydrocolloids help to retain moisture and help with the shelf life of that bar. All right, so in the last couple of minutes, I want to put together a little that little case study I talked about on sugar reduction and how functional buildback helped us to develop a keto-friendly yogurt. So real quick, there's no definition for net carbs, which is what the keto diet is kind of based on. So net carbs basically are total carbs minus fiber minus sugar alcohols, as it was originally designed. So within that space, this was after allulose came into the market. Allulose, since it's not considered a sugar, can be subtracted from that total as well. Even though it is a carb itself, it can be subtracted to get your net carbs. So that's the basis for our calculations on how we got to these to this keto-friendly product. So what are the challenges in making a low sugar or keto-friendly yogurt type product? So a lot of the sugar comes through in what's called the fruit prep. So if it's a fruit on the bottom or a blended type yogurt, there is a fruit component or fruit prep that's added. And this basically is where you find most of the added sugar. So it's in there as sugar itself. It comes through with the fruit and potentially with other thickeners in terms of the carbohydrate aspect. So keto products basically are based on consumer acceptability. So it still has to taste and have the texture of your traditional, full calorie, full carb yogurt. But also you have to look at the nutritional and the labeling standpoint. So again, looking at the net carbs, looking at any of the added sugars, you have to make sure that you meet those requirements. And then finally, cost. So a lot of these ingredients typically will add cost, especially compared to sugar. Sugar is very inexpensive, and pretty much everything you use to replace it is going to cost more. So you kind of have to balance that out as well. So what we looked at designing was kind of a yogurt with an inclusion that could be added to it. So if you think of like a Chobani Flip or anything that's got that little cup or sidecar with an inclusion that you blend in with the yogurt, this is what we were looking at as a finished concept. But first thing we looked at was the fruit prep. And in this case, we basically made what we called a no fruit prep. So this would be for a blended yogurt application, and we used vanilla as the flavoring. So based on our previous work in the area of coffee syrups, if you're familiar with those, that's that concentrate that you would add to a coffee. You'll see these in the Starbucks and the other coffee places. So that's the flavored syrup. So we use that concept to bring the flavor to the yogurt. So using that as a base, we used allulose and stevia to help reduce the sugar. So in this case, our no fruit prep that was vanilla flavored was based on allulose and a little bit of gum to bring the body back to it, as well as a stevia product. So this particular stevia had to be highly soluble because this was basically a concentrated syrup. So we had to be able to deliver that sweetness with the stevia, but also make sure that the stevia stays in that solution. So based on our calculations here, a lot of it was taken out by the use of the allulose. So basically a very low net carb type of fruit prep. So less than 1 gram of net carbs and less than 1 gram of added sugars at the same time. So the next step was that inclusion. So we decided to go with a brownie brittle. So again, formulating a keto-friendly brownie brittle, we had to take out pretty much all the sugar, but not that, and minimize the carb contribution at the same time. So in that case, we used the combination of the soluble corn fiber, the allulose, and the erythritol in order to get that functional build back that we would have lost with the sugar. We also added a Rev M stevia product to bring back the sweetness, and also one of our starches in order to give that specific texture to that brownie brittle. So in this case, the potato starch helped give that crispness that you typically associate with a brownie brittle or any brittle type product. So it had to be crispy, had to be crunchy, and it also had to stay crunchy once you blended it in with the yogurt. A lot of times those inclusions will get soft once you put them in. So the end result was we used the fruit prep, the brownie brittle, and a plain non-fat Greek yogurt as the base. And by using these different ratios of the fruit prep and the briny brittle inclusion, we're able to come up with a yogurt treat that was keto friendly, 7 grams of net carbs, and less than 1 gram of added sugar. So in this case, again, using our knowledge of the functional build-back ingredients, how to get the sugar reduction, how to minimize the carbs as well, and to still provide the sweetness and the same eating experience that you would get with a full sugar, full carb product, we're able to deliver that in this particular prototype. So that's it for the presentation on sugar reduction and functional build-back. Any questions come through, Cindy, or anyone else can feel free to jump in.
Wade, did you have a question?
Yes, I just typed in the chat box.
Okay, Eric does not see the chat box. Eric, I think if you close your presentation, you may be able to see it, or you could just go ahead and ask them.
Okay,
That probably would be fastest. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. First of all, thank you so much, Eric, for very interesting presentation.
Okay, sure, no problem.
Yeah, so I just have a quick question about using some of this sugar substitute you mentioned, such as stevia. So I never tried this particular substitute before, but from my experience tasting other artificial sweeteners, one interesting thing is the taste can be very different from cane sugar. Personally, I don't like the artificial sweeteners that is available in most of the restaurant and coffee shop. So I did some quick Google research on this stevia and found that also this particular, I found the chemical structures and so on. This particular chemical looks like some people taste this stevia also they felt it's very different from the table sugar taste. So I was wondering in your research and development process, do you also include sensory test or some sort of test on consumers to see if they are how well they accept a new formulated product with stevia or some other sugar substitutes?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. To answer that question, with stevia being, some stevia is being challenged in terms of the flavor profiles and the different types of sweetness that you get, as well as the aftertastes that are associated with a lot of the stevia products. We did a lot of upfront sensory many years ago, especially with Reb A. But since then, as stevia ingredient development or ingredient technology has developed over the years, the different steviol glycosides that I mentioned, the newer ones taste so much better and they taste more like sugar. So for example, Reb M, which is kind of like the newest stevia product on the market, that is the one that has the most sugar-like taste. And we have done sensory, both internal with our own sensory team, as well as with consumers, a little bit more informal. But I do distinctly remember an informal sensory evaluation with consumers, just everyday consumers, comparing Reb A versus Reb M. And they resoundingly said Reb M tastes much better than Reb A. And then our own internal studies, we've got all the data to show how the different sensory characteristics compare, like versus sugar, versus Reb M, versus other stevia products. So we look at sweetness, we look at linger, we look at astringency, we look at aftertaste, bitter, licorice, all the different flavor attributes that are associated with stevia. So we've done all the studies, we've done the sensory, we've plotted all the data to kind of give you more of a graphic representation. And I think Fernando probably will go into this into more detail when he talks about stevia and the presentation 2 weeks from now that will kind of give you a really good feel for how the different stevias compare from a sensory standpoint. And also against artificials as well. So there's some different challenges comparing stevia to artificials because of their flavor profiles, and more in terms of what we call time intensity, like the onset and the linger. They're a little bit different, stevia versus the artificials. So again, that's a bit of a challenge that we're still, trying to bring parity to with the artificials.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
If I may, I have another quick question about the safety of this kind of chemicals, because I also did some quick search on stevia. And it looks like FDA hasn't approved it as a GRAS status, generally regarded as safe as a food ingredient. And it has a recommendation of a daily intake of 4 milligrams per kilogram body weight. But also interestingly, I see some of the big companies like Coca-Cola and PepsiCo, they already use some of those stevia derived sugar substitutes in their beverages. So what's the story behind this? And is that a consideration when you develop a new product using this kind of not officially FDA approved ingredients in actual food products?
Well, I think if you're on the call with Fernando in a couple of weeks, I would ask him that same question. But from the consumer standpoint and the usage levels, there's probably, very, very rare, if any, chance that you're going to consume that much stevia based on those guidelines. Stevia usage is in parts per million in any given food product. So your daily intake is going to be very, very low. So unless you were like eating spoonfuls of stevia, which would probably, be self-limiting in itself. But no, that's a good question. That would be a good one to ask Fernando regarding that those guidelines. But again, stevia has been used in a variety of different products, consumer products, and there's been no objection to that as far as I know.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else?
Questions? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thanks, Cindy. Are there any questions from our students? So hi, Eric. I'm Burton Freeman. I'm the chair of the department.
Hi.
Nice to meet you. I apologize. I had to go in and out. I had an IRB meeting I had to sit in for shortly. So I missed a little bit of your presentation. I thought the parts that I did catch were fabulous. So I'm going to go back and see the video.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Maybe if our students want to think of a question for you, I'll give them a little bit of time. But I have a question. Again, I came in kind of late, so I don't know what was completely covered, which is too bad because I think this was a really excellent presentation. So my question has to do with consumers. So a couple of things that came to mind is consumer acceptance, of the different ingredients that Ingredion is manufacturing. So one about consumer acceptance and how are people viewing these things. I was actually looking at your ingredient label. It looks quite a bit different, perhaps on a nutrition facts and ingredient label versus what some of the products or ingredients that you were showing, right?
Mm-hmm.
How it's they're specified there. Adverse reactions always are of interest to me. But what kind of really caught my eye at the end there was how do consumers reconcile the net carbs, because they don't have all the information that you have. So, if you look at just, taking your total carbs and subtracting out the fiber, they don't know how to calculate out the alcohols and the allulose and all that kind of stuff. And so how does a consumer choose your product as a keto friendly or a low sugar, low net carbs? Does the government just allow you to specify it? How does it work?
Okay, good questions. So actually, yeah, the consumer insights was the very beginning. So that's the part you did miss.
Oh, okay.
No,
So I
but from-
apologize.
no, that's okay. That is one of the things that our company has addressed over the past few years as being an important component to how we develop and position our ingredients for not only our customers but for the consumers in general. So not only do we do the market research, we've focused on consumer insights. So again, this is going out and asking consumers, how do you, or what do you think about certain ingredients? And these are some of the things that other groups have done. We've done it ourselves on our own and looking at the acceptability of ingredients. Allulose being the latest one, because with any new ingredient, consumers aren't familiar with it. They always question things as they show up on labels because they're reading labels more. So that was one of the consumer insight studies that we did, where we went out and asked consumers, do you even know what allulose is? Have you ever heard of it? And would you accept it in a food product that you would purchase and consume? So initial feedback from that question was, originally like 90% of the consumer survey didn't know what allulose was. So then you give them a little bit of information, say it's a rare sugar, it's a sweetener, it's found in nature, it's low calorie, etc. Then they go, oh, okay, well then about half of the consumers said, yeah, that's okay. Well, I'll consider using or buying food products with that in it. And then you give them a little bit more information about some of its functional benefits, etc. A little bit more detail, how it's not an added sugar, how it doesn't contribute to sugars on a nutrition facts panel. Kind of explain a little bit about how it impacts the net carb thing. And then the acceptance level goes even higher. So it's all about education. So to your question about how does the consumer figure out what net carbs are, there is no official guideline on what that means. It's basically what has been developed, I'm not sure by who, but whoever has decided what keto is, and net carbs, and then you subtract the ingredients that would count as a carb. So sugar alcohols don't count, fibers don't count. With the recent ruling on allulose, that doesn't count either. So that's how you subtract it out to get the net carbs. So basically, I've seen it on consumer products where that's actually kind of spelled out on the package, where they say net carbs equals this, 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 and this, and that's where you find it in our products. So it's all about education and what the manufacturer is willing to convey to the consumer. And I think Chrissy had her hand up. She's our marketing person from Ingredion, so I think she can jump in and tell you a little bit more.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm in the program and I work with Eric at Ingredion. And so, yeah, that's exactly just to build on what Eric shared. Our customers are the CPG companies, right? And so our efforts are to educate them so that they can in turn, educate their consumer if that is, something that they're interested in positioning their product as keto. So we try to share with them, where we see allulose positioned. Again, as Eric mentioned, it's not regulated by the FDA, the definition of net carb. And so it's definitely up to that end customer. But we, just like Eric said, we have seen companies try to kind of educate their consumers around what that net carb calculation includes. And so we just try to arm our customers with kind of the background they need to make those decisions on how they want to position their products.
Great. Yes. Well, thank you. Are there other questions?
Hello, everybody. I just had a quick question. Thank you, first of all, for the great presentation and a lot of insights on the sweeteners and the replacement part. I just wanted to get to the cost factor as a consumer or also as a student going with the food industry. So as you are stating, there are a lot of available options, but we are also coming on the cost factor as like the end product or as an ingredient, as a whole. So, for example, the last case study which you told, that is an excellent product like keto yogurt, but we are, into this generation where keto, organic, these are getting sold out for a higher cost. Like, there is a big margin,
Mhm.
and it is mostly considered as a higher consumer end product. Like the layman's might not be even able to afford that due to some reason. So, how do the company or a product development person, targets that or considers that?
Oh, that's a great question. We hear that all the time from our customers because cost is a definite driver in the development phase of a new product. So, depending on the ingredient or ingredients that you're looking to replace, more often than not, the alternatives are going to be more expensive because you're replacing a commodity ingredient. So, something like sugar is relatively cheap, and any alternative is going to cost more. So, we look at it from a standpoint that we call cost in use. So how much cost incremental cost increase do you get by using these ingredients versus, like you were also saying, these products are typically positioned at a different level. They're not your mainstream product that has typically a lower margin associated with it. So using the keto yogurt as an example, if you look at the different keto yogurts that are on the market, they are significantly more expensive than their mainstream counterparts. So it's from a market standpoint where your audience is different. They're looking for a special product, and they typically are willing to pay more for it at the same time. So that's where the manufacturer is recouping some of that higher ingredient cost because they're positioning it in a market that is willing to pay the higher price because it offers something that they're looking for, whether it's less sugar or it's a keto friendly or whatever claim that it's being promoted above your mainstream product, it will demand a higher premium. So that helps with the ingredient cost standpoint. But again, it's top of mind with the product developer, and we look at it more of a cost and use as opposed to comparing ingredient cost versus ingredient cost, because you're going to lose every time if you look at it that way.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I wanted to ask that between allulose and sugar alcohols, which is better for like cooking purposes and the one for dental uses?
I'm sorry, what was the last use?
Dental use, like dental gums and stuff like
Oh,
that.
okay. I'll answer that last question first.
Um,
Sugar alcohols are preferred in oral hygiene type products because they're non-cariogenic. So all of them are what are considered tooth friendly, or they don't promote tooth decay or encourage bacteria growth that will lead to tooth decay.
mhm.
So that would be the preferred product family for oral care. Um, for cooking, a couple of different things come into play. I didn't show this in the polyol section, but one of the key differences between sugar alcohols and sugar, um, sugar alcohols have a minimal amount of reducing sugars, so they don't brown, so you don't get Maillard reaction. So if you're looking for that in baking or any type of cook process where you are intending to develop color as a result of the sugar component, sugar alcohols aren't going to give you that. So you have to make up for that by adding color. Um, uh, a big example is with caramel. Um, Cooked caramel has a particular flavor and color that you get when the sugar reacts with the proteins. And that's what makes caramel caramel. When you make a sugar-free caramel, you typically have to add color as well as caramel flavor in order to get that same eating experience. So with allulose, allulose is a reducing sugar, so it does brown very nicely. So it works really well in baking. So any application where you want color development, allulose will give you that, whereas sugar alcohols will not. But from an oral care standpoint, no, sugar or the allulose, probably not good to rinse your mouth with.
Okay.
So, I had one more question regarding all the different categories of the sweeteners, of the substitutes we were discussing. So there would be some which are, naturally derived, and some might be chemically processed or, used chemicals.
Mhm.
So when you're considering using them as a substitute for a already established sugar, so isn't in a manner you are incorporating more chemically derived components in the final ingredient list? Like depending on
Um,
the choice, obviously.
Right, absolutely. That's a good point. Again, that comes down to um, the finished product and the consumer in terms of what they're looking for on that label, because they are looking at labels more closely than ever before. So um, they're staying away from the more chemically derived ingredients, any modified this or chemically sounding ingredients. So the ones, some ingredients are recognized as quote unquote natural, like stevia. Um, Allulose, again, that was a consumer insight that we did. What's their perception of allulose? Do they think it's okay from a label standpoint? Erythritol is a good case in point from a sugar alcohol standpoint. You'll see erythritol used in a lot of the quote unquote naturally sweetened products. So that's been accepted by consumers as being more label friendly. So again, it depends on what the end product requirements are. Most people are looking for what we call clean label products. So you want to stay toward those in terms of your sweetener choices as well. And some are more accepted than others. So, I mean, if you look at corn syrup or glucose syrup, believe it or not, people will prefer tapioca syrup over corn syrup, even though it's still a refined ingredient. So it's still chemically processed, but tapioca sounds better than corn. So you've got all these little levels of acceptance. So.
Okay, I have one most likely last question. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. My question is, like I saw on your slides, like you have this like non-GMO derived. Like how much do you have to face this GMO versus non-GMO ingredients in your like product development and whenever you are promoting your products?
Sure. Again, that kind of falls into that whole clean label space. So non-GM will fall into that category as well. So um, again, depending on the market that that particular product is going to go into. So if you're looking at like a Whole Foods type acceptable product, non-GMO would be preferred. Um, Anything that's got a natural halo around it, non-GMO is a definite plus. Um, Anything with the butterfly logo, that is a highly recognized front of pack symbol for a non-GMO product or a product that contains non-GMO ingredients. So it definitely has a place in the market. The consumers that are looking for that probably are in the minority at this point, but I think people are aware of it. Whether or not it has meaning to them or not, that's another story. And also depending on whether or not the non-GM product comes with a premium over a GM product. So a lot of times you'll see um, products have been converted over to non-GM just because that's becoming more of a standard in the industry today. So you'll see more non-GM ingredients being made available, and that's the case with our company as well. We try to offer as many non-GM alternatives as possible for those who are looking for it, and we've seen a very high demand for it. So that trend is going in that direction.
Yeah, I had a quick question that stevia does have a like bitter aftertaste. So how do you like tackle that when developing products which has like stevia as a sweetener?
Okay, that's a good question as well. And I think Fernando will cover this, but just real quickly, with the newer developments in stevia technology and the different types of stevioglycosides that we've been able to extract from the leaf, there are definitely some that taste a lot better than others. So I think most product developers started with Reb A, and that was a challenge in itself. And not having the background on how to use it probably didn't help matters. So that's where most of that whole connotation of bitter licorice flavor comes from, is with the Reb A products. So Reb M, as I mentioned earlier, is more of the next generation stevia. It tastes much better. It tastes more like sugar. You can use it at higher levels without getting any aftertaste that's associated like with Reb A. So if anything, you get more of a sweet linger than anything else with Reb M. So there's that as an alternative. Plus all the different ingredients in the Pure Circle portfolio, the flavor, what we call NSFs, or the stevias with flavor modulating properties, those can be added to help mask off notes or aftertaste, not only of stevia, but other ingredients as well. So a lot of the combinations of ingredients that we've used, if you're not using or if you're not achieving a high level of sugar reduction and you want to work with Reb A, you can use Reb A and one of the NSFs or ones with the flavor modulating properties to help mask some of the Reb A characteristics. So there are a lot of ways to tackle that aftertaste problem, just not only by stevia choice, but by combinations of stevias as well, depending on your application and the amount of sweetness or sugar reduction you're looking for. So that definitely can be solved.
Okay, well, I think we should probably wrap up this seminar for September 9th. Eric, we really appreciate you speaking to us today. Amazing, at least for the part that I was able to participate in, but lots of after discussion, which tells me that you definitely engaged everyone. So again, thank you so much. And we'll look forward to meeting your colleague in a couple of weeks.
All right.
But
Well,
for all of you in the audience, every Thursday, 1 o'clock, standard fare seminar in food science and nutrition. We'll see you then.
all
All right.
Thanks,
Thanks
everybody.
all.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it.
Okay, you're quite welcome,
Bye-bye.
Cindy. Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Mhm.